Everyone, and thank you for joining us today. We are excited to bring you this topic focused on higher education and our Inside the Workplace report, the key results from that. Before we dive in, I want to go over some of the interactive tools that you can use within our platform. My name is Corey Marshall. I'm a campaign marketing manager here at Johnson Controls, and I'll be hosting the event for you today. On the right-hand side of your screen, you have some options. One is our chat feature, and that allows you to send messages to the entire audience and get responses. I will poke some questions in there for you to answer. We have our Q&A. So if you have questions for our presenters, please add them to that Q&A tab. And if we have time at the end, we will go through those and get some answers for you. If we're not able to get through those at the end, we will follow up with you after today's event. And then we also have polls, the next tab on the right-hand side. We do have one poll that's coming up later in the presentation, so watch out for that. Please answer, and we will talk through the results of that. We also will share with you a link for our upcoming webinar so you can get registered for that. But with that, I think we are ready to get started. So I'm going to turn it over to our speakers to introduce themselves and share this content. So DK and Stephen, the floor is yours.
So my name is David Cornegi, but many people call me DK. I've been in the industry for about 27 years. A large portion of that was dealing in the educational market, including higher education. I began in the realm of things like asset tagging, moved my way into energy management, construction management projects, as well as technical software types of projects. Last few years I've been here working especially to gather more deeper into the space management realm, in addition to maintenance management and asset management, energy management systems, and sustainability initiatives, and have since transitioned over into the product management side, focused primarily on the workplace applications. I'm going to turn it over now to Mr. Stephen to let him introduce himself and get us kicked off.
That's great. Thanks, DK. Good morning to you all, and good afternoon from the UK here. I'm Stephen Pyers. I'm part of the strategy team here at the Open Blue team. My background is from financial services, where I spent over 28 years at one of the world's largest global organizations, but I worked across the corporate real estate function, supporting the facility management teams throughout the world, deploying technology to the organization to help the workplace experience. So I very much come with that client perspective. But you know what? We all have the same challenges, irrespective of the sector and organizations that we work for. So delighted to be here. Okay. I'm going to kick off today with some of the stats from this 2025 Inside the Workplace Higher Education report. And I think it's interesting to see 2024 we know is all about mandates and return to the office. So it's no huge surprise to see the shifts in these statistics over the last 12 months. Last year, when we undertook the survey, 50% of our higher educational respondents predicted a 5-day working week in the office. And this year, it's very much the same. We're predicting still this time next year, we're looking for a 5-day in the office. Universities, higher educations are becoming less flexible. And I think this is in contrast with what the workforce want, where our employees and facility staff are looking for flexibility, tailored to the work that we're doing, that I'm doing. 47% of colleagues who are in a hybrid working arrangement are all saying that they need to come into the office to collaborate, but not looking to do 5 days a week. So it's a really interesting dilemma. You have the employer trying to push for 5 days, and you have the workforce saying we need more flexibility still. DK, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think we're seeing more of that collaboration really come in. I mean, real estate is not cheap anywhere, and it's really a premium in higher education. Every square foot counts. And that is something that if you're going to dedicate that space, you want to maximize how that is being used. And we'll talk a bit more about the collaboration portion of it. But usually what I see in higher education and corporate run parallels, but higher ed will deepen certain things. And the allocation of square footage is one of the most politically charged and most cost effective things that people can invest in.
Definitely interesting. I think also we're seeing now the shift in the balance between what our university leadership and higher education leadership teams want versus again the workforce and what the faculty staff and employees alike are looking for. When we talk about this sort of data stat, when we interviewed and discussed with your leaders, we are asking them, when you're looking to identify a new location, what is important to you? Coming out of the pandemic, things like the commute time were really important, making sure that the workforce didn't spend too long in the commute. Also, making sure that there are lots of amenities around the campus or on campus or within the towns to make it a great place to come to the work. No longer those sort of priorities are being deprioritized versus the cost agenda and really the operational agenda to drive greater outputs and outcomes, I guess, for the workplace.
And I would say that one of the things that we're also coming across, nothing has changed on the sense that you have to be good stewards of your monies, your finances, and your budgets. I can only name probably 2 out of 12,000 conversations I've had over the years where university has said we have enough money and staff. So you can't even put a fraction of a percentage on that type of percentage of conversations. And to the point we were seeing earlier is I've seen it even with some of the universities here in Charleston where they would promote things like you get access to this club, this gym, this lunch. They would try to look at amenities to drive people in to say, well, once you're here on campus, you get all these perks to help drive it. But we're not seeing quite as much focus on that, to Stephen's point, as we had seen in the past. And so, just like we would see in the corporate world, is what is the strategic goal of the university with what the employees want? Because one of the things that we've always seen over the years is universities are fighting for talent with corporations. So how do you get those people in? How do you want them to come in? What are they going to do when they get here? How are they going to grow and learn and contribute to the university? Because you've got a lot of perks and benefits that companies out there are trying to compete with. It's probably a little better with the marketplace today than it's been in the past year plus, but it is still there where you're fighting for talent with these companies that are out there in your organizations.
Actually, I think there's also the ESG agenda, the social and governance piece, and around sustainability agenda. I think we've had a various response to how much of a priority that is to leadership, but definitely the workforce sees that as a priority too. So it's an interesting time to understand how certain topics are being deprioritized and actually where that lack of flexibility again is coming in. It is becoming more stringent, more strict. It's an interesting time. Okay, let's jump to the next slide. But I think one thing everybody agrees on is the purpose of the workplace is collaboration. Absolutely. And we know that through all of our research, if you're hybrid or full-time in office or permanently remote, that opportunity for human connection is absolutely key. Absolutely key. I think one of the stats was 67% of respondents said that collaboration, be it team meetings, client meetings, socializing opportunities, but also that the innovation, the opportunity to innovate together and having those serendipitous moments was absolutely key and so important. And just to have good human to human contact. 48% of hybrid workers say they only come into the office really for that person to person connection with colleagues, to network, or just say hello to people. So I don't think we're seeing collaboration absolutely as being one of the key drivers, but again, it's coming into the workplace with purpose. 5 days a week, people are mandating that, but it's I need to come in with purpose, and that collaboration is the primary reason.
Yeah, the collaboration, it doesn't matter if it's been corporate and higher ed, because I've had the same conversation in both series of markets, is that there's a learning environment needs to happen that cannot be done the same in a digital way. There's something about the human presence. It's how you ideate. It's about how you learn also as well, how to interact with people, because one of the key elements I'm hearing, whether it's uh, let's say a CFO at a financial institution that that I speak to, it is we have our daughters at the same school, and we talk about this as well, not just in the marketplace but out. Is a lot of the graduates might have skill sets technically, but they don't have the social presence because they've been so digitized. So being able to work in a collaborative environment, in a team environment, a physical team environment, how to interact with each other, that's a big element that I'm seeing just on a personal level outside of these statistics about the collaboration being the main benefit. Many of that get that. And even here internally, tasting our own dog food, a lot of our folks would say, we miss being in the office to connect on this topic or that topic, picking up a tip, something that when you pass somebody in the hallway or getting coffee, it's like, oh, something just triggered that would not have triggered otherwise. So no offense against instant messenger and all those tools, but it's just different when you're in person and you can focus on the person and you're not distracted by three screens. Not that I'm not having three screens in front of me right now, but there's just a different type of focus that comes in. And hybrid is for your workforce, but it's also for the universities, it's classrooms, because I've seen many of the college and university courses where it'll say 50% hybrid. So if you've got classroom space, that classroom space is vital to understand, well, how many people are actually coming into that space? Not just what its function is, what its focus is, its type is, what classes are happening. But if it's a 70-person space and you've got 20 people showing up half the time during the week, is that really an optimal use of space? So we're talking about the purpose of the office, but on a college campus, it's beyond the professor's office or the administration offices.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I would say that in that same vein of things like utilization data, so I look at utilization data as, well, you scheduled a class or you scheduled a meeting or you scheduled a time to sit at your desk. Doesn't mean you actually show up, or you don't show up in the way that you expect on an 8-hour day, or whatever the classroom schedules are for that day. So having data is important for that. But air quality is a very big topic that we would see in multiple environments as well. And because of the state of technology, it's doing much better in the technical side, but also the competence side than it's been in the past. We've got better building automation and management systems, better monitoring systems, better IoT devices than we've had before. So getting the data has seen an increase in competence. So most people are pretty comfortable what they're getting for their environmental information. Now, indoor air quality, they want a little better, sense of what's happening there. So whether it's a conference room in a corporate office or whether it's a classroom on university, we would see things when looking at some of the environmental sensors. Once markers start breaking out, the air quality goes down. When the air quality goes down, the learning environment goes down. So there's elements that have to be considered for IAQ, not just in the research spaces, but also just in the general learning environment, because that definitely affects whether or not a student wants to come to class and whether or not they pay attention that's in class. So we're seeing an increase in IAQ. That was something that came from last year that was also very important, is looking at that. So when we're looking at productivity, it's not just productivity from a worker standpoint, it's also productivity from a learning environment standpoint. And also, when you've got that information down, if you're balancing your systems correctly, you've got them running on a proper schedule, then you can start looking at cost savings opportunities into that as well. And usually what we'll see when it comes to cost savings, we'll talk a bit more around in the AI section.
Got it. But I also see it's also giving confidence back to your students. You need your students to create your workforce, to create the economies of scale for your universities and centres. It's great that actually we can now start to play back to them about the indoor air quality and hold ourselves accountable for creating those great learning spaces, because it's super important. We find it in the corporate world, as you mentioned earlier, but I can't imagine. I'm thinking back to my days a long time ago. Yeah, I think it's super important. It's coming up the agenda now. Really do. Sustainability also is a strategic imperative these days. Now, we would argue the last couple of years, due to macroeconomic pressures, there may have been a deprioritization of some of the sustainability topics, but absolutely, majority of the leadership that we surveyed absolutely putting sustainability up there as a higher priority, more so than ever than last year. And this really is motivated by the regulatory and compliance backcloth, um, being good citizens, being able to attract students through that ESG agenda, through the sustainability initiatives, and being able to attract and retain through the brand of the higher education facilities. And surprisingly, 92% of organizations do now have their sustainability goals in place and are on track to meet them. I know here in the UK, we've shifted from 2030 to other dates in the future to be net zero, but definitely the whole industry, all industries are taking this significantly as an imperative, a must do.
Yeah, and the brand enhancement part, I think, is something that sticks probably more in the U.S. Um, the quality of a campus when a student comes onto it for their visiting will just usually it's about 2/3. I think the old number used to be 64%. Was the quality of the campus, the condition of the campus was a motivating factor for a student to be attracted to the campus and to stay at the campus. And sustainability falls into some of those elements as well. I mean, these are these are students that grew up. As I was at the beginning when we started getting into recycling, so it became pretty quickly part of something a lot of the people in my age bracket were pretty well used to. That's been amplified more in the younger generation. So they're looking at what things around climate change and so on has been happening. So that there is a brand element that goes to it. The fun part would be with the universities also, would they would have competitions around, who saved, so much water, so it might be, let's say in North Carolina, might have been Duke versus Carolina versus State, where were the goals at for that? And probably since around 2006, 2007, most of those college and university presidents' commitment to the climate really helped spur a lot of that. And you still see elements of it today. But there's nothing that really bites more than compliance when there are rules, regulations, and laws around it, especially in certain states. Those are other motivating factors as well. So this is a topic that definitely has been gaining momentum, I would say, on the upswing again over the last couple of years. And there's also the cost savings part. The most expensive place on a campus is the lab. So when we're looking at things around, well, what are some efforts we could do around air quality, air balancing, anything around gas, propane? What can we look at from not just making sure that those places are adequately conditioned and supplied, but what can we look at from a cost improvement standpoint? Because that's monies that you can actually make a sustainable dent into, no pun intended, maybe pun intended. You can make a dent into when you start looking at ways to say, okay, well, what if we submeter this, or we change our schedules for that, or what if we put in this piece of equipment? What's the payback time going to be? But still help us on the sustainability front while providing function and comfort to our occupants.
Definitely, and I know here in the UK, even simple things like a cycle to school, cycle to education schemes is being pointed towards the sustainability agenda too. I couldn't afford a car when I was a student, but definitely EV charging, all of those things coming into the mix. And I think the motivator here we've got brand enhancements there. It's a public negative impact upon your facility and penalties ultimately for non-compliance. So it's a blend of doing the right thing and against that backcloth of that regulation, which has definitely dialed up over recent years. Interesting.
Yeah, and I mentioned things like AI. So we're seeing definitely an uptick. I don't know if I see people define what they want AI to do in an elegant way for across the board. But people know that there are benefits from it. They plan to deploy something along the lines in the very near future. Now, where I see it on the operations and maintenance stand front would be things around, let's say, preventive maintenance. So certainly predictive maintenance. One of the fun things I liked about a feature that JCI came out with was something called observations and recommendations. And it was, you have reports and KPIs that have been around for a while, graphs, charts, that's great. But unless you really know what to look for, it's like you have to go do it. Whereas this is more like a I'm letting type of approach. And so things around AI can really help shake a little bit of the past. We're still going to have dashboards for a while, and there's no offense against them. But having something help you surface A, an issue, and B, alternatives for a solution versus you just see a number. That's where I've seen it go into the operations and maintenance front. I've also seen it start working in the predictive maintenance realm. What could it be looking at for? Well, here are some considerations for routines. So I would say that 63% is a great start, and we're just beginning to go down that route. But when we're looking at things like machine learning and some of the automations to understand how does your system operate? How does it operate in your specific environment? Those are things that usually need to come forward. Is how is the layout of the building? If these spaces are near a window that's getting a lot of sunlight during the day, that's a factor. Your weather is a factor. Your general environment's a factor. The age is a factor. So being able to say this is not just a one size fit all number like life cycle management has been in the past, is what is going to factor what you're looking at from a capital planning and forecasting standpoint. And we're seeing the growth of interest in robotics, but also the digital twins, I would say, is one that we're seeing more of. Is I need to understand virtually what is happening. Luckily, we're able now, since probably the last 20 years plus, is start looking at things like Revit, and now you're seeing tools like Tandem and other groups, come together to say, well, here's a visualization before the construction. There's been some growth after the construction to say, here's what we're looking at from that standpoint. But being able to tap into, some of the readings, the structural layout, not just in 2-dimensional nowadays, but now 3-dimensionals. Occasionally might have to do some recommissioning and readjustments to make sure that the twin versus reality, is there, because whenever I would walk through a building doing assessments years ago, I would say that the building would be 10% different than it was the year before. So just understanding that the digital twins, is a very important thing. Also, there's a little bit of care and feeding and just making sure the digital fits the reality. But there's a lot of potential to understand what's happening in your building from the comfort of your desk before you send somebody out into the field. Because again, I've never seen anybody except for maybe 2 that said they were adequately staffed. So being able to have efficiencies is something that these digital twins, machine learning, and generative AI is going to help with that.
I think it's also that it's taking those other data sets and applying AI over the top to really give different outcomes and different perspectives. If we think about the classroom and the utilization of that, think about the weather conditions, and think about student absenteeism, bring all those data points together to really painting a richer picture about how the building's being used, and those human and outside factors coming in can really give you great insight and help you plan for your next scheduling of classrooms and times. And also, what space do you need? And are there different interventions that HR or student councils need to do around different times of the year where you're seeing perhaps absenteeism peak, drop, etc.? So it's bringing different data points together, applying AI, and learning from that with recommendations. And back to observations, really, isn't it, DK? Observations and recommendations. Go and lift a stone up and look under it, really.
Mm-hmm. And then where I see AI start coming into play too is, if we make a change, for example, could I use AI to look at construction costs, alternatives? How would that affect things around the energy usage, the energy consumption? if it makes any changes at all. We used to have this room called the conference room of doom, that I named it anyway, where it was a room that was not split properly. And so because they had changed the room, they didn't change the ductwork, and other types of air quality issues really started happening again, especially when it was after lunch. You had 6 people in a small room and you start breaking out markers. It was not a place you wanted to be in, and had poor lighting. So what are things that AI can do to help with those considerations, that as you make changes to your portfolio, what are some of the considerations that you may have to consider with that?
Got it. Right. Okay. So it's now time for our poll question. We'd like to understand how AI and other workplace technologies are helping you in your workplace today.
Yeah, and where I would say some of these items would be, I just mentioned some things that might be around scenario planning. Also answering questions on usage. Some people like to use the concept of a chatbot to be able to say, go look at the database and address these items. Also, we mentioned observations and recommendations. That would be something like a consideration for solving issues. Work ticket creation is, instead of a person or a calendar creating the work order, what if it was generated from a building automation system or something like an observations and recommendations? And then surface potential issues, that would be sort of along the lines of observations and recommendations, but it would be much more at the front to say, well, here is I don't know, company we used to call it the threat radar. What are things I really need to pay attention to, on that front? Is tell me what I don't know.
It is interesting, isn't it? So we're using AI and technology to surface the issue, but we're not listening to AI yet around the recommendations for solving the issue. And that's I guess where we see the sector going, where we see technology going, is really providing that outcome. Maintenance service orders, ticket creation, that's an interesting one as well. Around, I guess it's changing from preventative to predictive maintenance, based upon the asset condition and what we know about the asset and the environment. Data analysis, answering questions on usage. Again, that's really where we can all be leaning into AI now. AI telling us about how the spaces are being utilized, and leading us to the conclusion that space A in building B is your worst performing. Perhaps consider mothballing it, etc. So it is interesting, isn't it? See, actually, we're using it to identify the problem. Great, but we're not yet at that stage where we're starting to trust or use it to help inform the resolution. Thanks for those responses. I guess it's time over to you as the audience. Any questions of DK and myself, or questions about the report, or what you've heard this morning?
All right. One question that we have is really around like misconceptions. What are some misconceptions that you've heard specifically around like from different universities, colleges, when it comes to implementing some smart building technologies?
For me, it's been that we don't need the facility staff. We can reduce facility staff, and I don't think that's right. Absolutely not. Definitely not. It's technologies there is to enable a quicker run to the noise, and to help the facility team, who are always being constrained on cost and resources, to be able to run in a more priority way to the noise, prioritize their day. But definitely, it's not about reducing the workforce. It's about helping the workforce prioritize everything they need to do.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I remember a few companies ago, a vendor came into my booth and wanted to talk about how the software I was working with was going to, help them reduce staff, and I kicked him out of my booth. Flat out kicked him out of my booth. I'm still mad about it today. I do not. It makes me very irritated when somebody will talk to. I mean, most markets, but especially university, about staff reductions because many of them are struggling. One of the biggest faults that I see in new construction on campuses is they will build a new building and not add custodial staff. That to me is asinine. I'm just not even going to sugarcoat it. Is you will add 100,000 square feet and not a person to clean it or another person to maintain it. That is not a valid strategy for investing in your buildings. So, when we're looking at ways to optimize, that's what we're looking at is how many square feet can a custodian cover in a day? How many square feet is typically a maintenance operations repair person needed to maintain those areas? Those types of numbers is where I think AI can help come into that. So we've had certain standards like APA over the years that helps people prioritize, well, what is the routine going to be and how many square feet can you cover. But I would say that's been one of the top questions I've heard over almost 30 years is how much staff do we need for X? And having the data to help back that up with AI saying here's some things to come in, I think AI helps boost that. But that's one of the things that I usually, to your point, is no one has enough staff that I'm aware of on the physical plant, maintenance, operations, real estate side. Everybody is running at 100 miles an hour and has 19 jobs to do. I would say the other thing is just trying to get a hold of the data is breaking down political barriers. I wouldn't say it's always political barriers. Sometimes it's you do your thing so deeply, you forget that there's 5 other things around you. So just periodically breaking down the silos to share information is also important. I'll get off my soapbox now.
That's fine. We are out of time. We are past a minute or so past. I did want to thank both Stephen and DK for presenting today and bringing your insights into this topic. I really appreciate it. And then to draw our attendees' attention to a couple handouts that I posted in big marker. One is for our next webinar, which I had mentioned at the top of the call. And then I also placed in there the actual report that we were talking through, the full findings that for higher education. You can find that in the handout section as well, a direct link to that PDF. But with that, we're going to close out. Thank you all for attending, and we will see you on our next one, hopefully. Thanks so much. Have a great day.
Goodbye.